Hi, my name is Eleni, and today we'll talk about how our current era is demanding a new way we process emotions. Now, this might seem difficult, but it really isn't. First, just to bring some context, since the 1960s and 70s, there's been an experience that people have become reconnected to our inner state, our inner world. And so we start to figure out that we have a purpose and meaning. And you could see the progression if you look at it from people saying in the 60s and 70s, saying peace and love, and then humanity's becoming more important, and then humanity's being squeezed out, and then purpose and meaning. And so we're in a time, a historical time, where we want meaning in our lives. We want purpose. And what's interesting is we believe we have an internal inner purpose that's specific to ourselves. That's something that is very new. We used to say, okay, we understand a purpose, like the purpose of life is to procreate or to have more life. But now we're realizing that we actually, each one of us has a specific purpose, and the goal is to find that, which makes a very different life trajectory than saying the purpose of life is procreating or the purpose of life is having a great career, right? So it's very different. Now, why does this matter now? Because we have a different way of feeling, which influences our way of thinking and our way of behaving. So as an example, as a very rudimentary example, we go to work and we want to feel that our work is meaningful. But what if we're in a job and we're coding all day for 10, 12 hours a day, and we feel like after a while, like we don't see the meaning because the coding is to solve problems that came up yesterday, or that might come up in 1 week, or it's because the last person who was doing the coding used this approach and not that approach, and it starts to feel meaningless. It's like, what is the point of all this? And if we work in a group where the boss or the leader doesn't remind us of the purpose, we get lost in the details, and we can start to feeling that our work is meaningless, and that affects how we think. Like, my life is meaningless, what I'm doing is meaningless, what am I doing? And then I feel worse about myself, and then I respond. Maybe I'm a little bit more curt, maybe I can't sleep well, and then I get impatient. Maybe I don't have time to go out with friends so that I haven't had the joy of playing or rejoicing or rejuvenating myself, and then I go back to work and I'm faced with this coding, and it can become even depressing. And so we could look at the research, and it shows all these numbers. There are people who even study this on a macro level and say, okay, our jobs are killing us. Being a little bit extreme, but it does happen where people are so stressed out from chronic stress, not from excited stress of having a great new project or getting something done, but chronic stress and chronic feeling of meaninglessness. This affects then our bodies. Neck pain, headaches, stomach pain, back pain, low energy, insomnia, not feeling well, not wanting to go out, maybe starting to eat a little bit more sugar or alcohol or caffeine to try to feel better. I've had clients who take caffeine in the morning with coffee and sugar, and they pump themselves all day, and they take alcohol at night to be able to sleep. And this process of up and down, up and down. The nature should be doing this when we're healthy, but because we get so stressed out and we focus on the external in a world where we have been asked or expected to leave our emotions at the door. Now, this has been going on for centuries, where there's been a demonization or a disrespect or distrust of emotions, as if it's going to make us cry all day or just have a therapeutic need. It's really not that way when we start to speak to them. And our approaches of avoiding, resisting, ignoring, disliking our emotions doesn't work anymore. Why? Because we have all those symptoms. And because with this new awareness of this inner need, inner purpose, we actually have to use our creativity to access that. And creativity is from an emotional state of being. So when we feel open and we're like having space to think about some things, that's why it's so common to have ideas when you're in the shower or in the bathtub or in the garden, doing something that has nothing to do with what you care about necessarily, but then you come up with really good ideas because your mind has space to move and your emotions are allowed, so to speak, to ideate. And so the question is now, what do we do? Now, we've been taught to ignore emotions. Many of us have done well in doing our best to do that. We have more and more symptoms, and at the public level, we can see increased depression. People get on opioids to avoid feelings, drinking, all kinds of behavior trying to numb the feeling because we don't want to feel it. Now, human-centric leading offers a new approach, and an approach that could be useful in today's world. And it says, okay, let's look at emotions just as data. We don't have to look at it as good or bad, useful or not useful, positive or negative. We could look at it as just data. We can notice how we've been and we became judgmental. Like feeling bad is bad, feeling good is good, feeling frustrated is bad. We have all these rules, and if we start to say, okay, what if we start to look at the emotions as information or data that come to us to inform us of something, our state of being, something that happened that hurt us that we may want to respond to in the moment, and we start to use it in a way that's very kind of utilitarian. It doesn't mean it downplays emotions, but the more we use our emotions, the more rich our lives can be, and the more creative and the more fun. Because as Brené Brown, the very famous person who talks about vulnerability, she has found out very clearly from her research, and this has been supported by neuroscientists as well, is that when we dumb down or numb down certain emotions, we numb them all. You can't numb frustration and anger without numbing happiness and joy. And that's the reason that we don't want to keep doing that. We know more now about emotions. In the past, 50 years, we've learned a lot through brain scans, through neuroscience research, through illnesses of people who don't feel, like autism, or other such experiences where people don't feel, and we can learn from that. And so in an era where we both, one, have a yearning to find our purpose, and number two, we know a lot about emotions, and that when we express them, doesn't mean we have to express them in an angry way or in an aggressive way or in a desperate way, but when we start to express them by naming them, by understanding or decoding them and responding to them instead of mainly ignoring, we get to feel a lot more types of feelings, and we feel more vital. We feel more alive, and we feel more able to pursue our purpose, to figure out what is my purpose, what do I want to do with my life. So this is maybe a long-winded approach to saying that today's world requires a new approach toward our emotions without us having to go into a therapeutic approach, which might take too long, especially when we're working in an organizational context. So we can use this idea of human-centric leading at looking at ourselves and each other as emotional creatures. Because if you think about it, if you think about humanity, who are we without our emotions? If you say, I respect your humanity, that means you respect my full set of skills, which are logical and emotional, intuitive, and other. And so that's the interesting part of this second humanistic movement, is we're going back to who are we as humans. We're not replaceable cogs in a wheel who are only good as what we achieve or what we own. We're more than that. We're more than all of those achievements. Even those achievements are fabulous, but we acknowledge that we have these emotional needs that we haven't been taught to respond to. And now, since the 80s, when I say now, I mean a bigger picture, but since the 80s, people who have been studying leaders and people who are able to deal with the increased level of uncertainty and ambiguity, they always have a capacity toward their emotions, and they call it emotional intelligence. And so it's this way of understanding one's own emotions, being able to empathize with other people's emotions, and then just talk about them. Not necessarily in a long-winded way, but it's like, what is making you anxious in this moment? What is making me anxious? Why are we frustrated about this project? Why are we angry at this group of people? And it helps us understand what makes us feel those ways to then respond in a way that is helpful and makes us feel better and also makes us feel more powerful. So it's not like taking a drink and we feel better. We're not necessarily more powerful because we're dependent now on that drink. The idea is we can feel more powerful by just decoding our emotions and then responding from there, and we're not dependent on anything. We're still, independent. And so this is one of the ways that you could explore, if you wish, how to use emotions as data, how to use the human-centric leading model of looking at yourself and others, with empathy and looking at your own and others' intellectual, emotional, and other types of needs. So like a holistic view, and then say, okay, what would a wise person do in this situation? Or what does someone need in this situation? What would make this better? How can we use our frustration? Let's say we're frustrated in a team. We're not frustrated out of the blue. We're frustrated because we want one thing and we're getting another. So we either change what we want, change what we're getting, do something new, but we use that information to help us move forward. So this is one example of a way to be in today's world where we've been taught, we have a long legacy of ignoring emotions and vilifying emotions. We have a really good skill set of ignoring them. Some people even say they don't have emotions. That's how far away they've pushed their emotions. And this comes from socialization. But when we've gotten reconnected to our purpose and we want to feel meaning, we need to then look at ourselves as in our entirety, and therefore learn new skills as to how to look at emotions in a neutral way, normalizing them instead of demonizing some and wanting only others, and accepting them as a whole and moving from there.